As the World Cup gets underway in Brazil this week, many of you may be asking, what's the big deal? Well, for one, it is considered the biggest event of the biggest sports business on earth. And the group that heads up the event, FIFA, expects to make, get this, $4 billion. Joe Krier, president of Krier Wealth Management, is here with a look at some of the numbers. Good morning to you. Thanks for being here. Do appreciate it. So, for one, we know that Brazil has spent a ton of money hosting these games. And, I was just hearing, in fact, last night, that there's still construction going on because they've really had a hard time getting all the work done as quickly as they needed to.
Oh, yeah. They've laid out about $11 billion already. And, there's a lot of unrest in Brazil because people feel that, hey, that should go to rail workers and other infrastructure projects rather than stadiums that might only get used 4 or 5 times. And as you said, some of these stadiums, because they're behind schedule, they're untested. They're going to get capacity crowds for the first time over the next few days. And there's a lot of finger crossing going on down there.
Yeah, hoping that it works. Now, let's talk about FIFA. First of all, if you could explain to our viewers unfamiliar with it, since they probably haven't been following it as closely as people around the world, what is the controversy with this group, this kind of governing body?
Well, FIFA has gained a lot of power over the last few years as call it the professionalization of the sport has really taken hold. And the revenues around this have gone up 6-fold over just the last 8 years. So FIFA, that was initially a non-profit organization, all of a sudden is pulling in $4 and $8 billion worth of revenues, and the numbers are astronomical.
Well, let's compare it too. I know that we've got for visual aid here. So the revenues up 66% from South Africa.
Right. And, $1.7 billion from marketing our TV rights and another $1.3 billion from marketing rights. And you've got Coca-Cola, Visa, Adidas, Budweiser. You've got the big names in there. And when you get that kind of money behind something, it's really going to roll.
Well, it's interesting, too. Just out of curiosity, I wonder how that compares to just even, football, as we call it here. They call it football over there, obviously, but American football here in the States.
Sure. Well, and that's a great question. American football is king sport here in the U.S. Even though soccer is making some headway, it's going to be a few years. However, on a global basis, when you add up English Premier League and FIFA World Cup, all the different activities, soccer revenues are 2 or 3 times that of U.S. football.
That certainly puts it in perspective. And, we saw with the game that was just here, in fact, Friday, I think it was, with USA playing here, I mean, the stadium was packed. People really are getting into it, not just here in Florida, but in the United States. Are you seeing that? Because you're mentioning some big companies, certainly U.S.-based companies, that are really kind of getting on this bandwagon of soccer?
Yeah, there's a trend here, and it hasn't happened as quickly as people would have expected. And some people say that Americans, our attention span is too short to watch 90 minutes of soccer with 1 goal or
it's not
whatever.
Always as interesting to watch it. And I say that, and I played soccer for many, many years, and my children do, but it is a little more difficult. It's not quite as interesting, I think, to watch as football.
Sure, and it's taking hold because, as you mentioned, your children's generation and their children will have grown up playing this sport where when we were kids, it was football and hockey and basketball and baseball. And now with soccer as sort of a core child sport, they're going to grow up, they're going to have a heck of a lot more interest, and I think you're going to see this really take hold. And by the way, if the U.S. happened to win one on a World Cup basis, it would change the game entirely. Highly unlikely, but we're a bunch of bandwagon fans here in the U.S., and we'd be on board right away.
Oh, man, it would be fun to watch that also. And, I'm also hearing that ahead of just the real concerns that there will be protests in Rio de Janeiro, the teams that are competing are actually displaying their own colors in the opposite areas, to try to, get everybody, hey, let's get along. This is soccer, but let's keep it on the field.
Sure, and, one of the biggest expenses of FIFA is security. They're laying out something like $37 million per team to protect players, and just crowd control is a huge thing because, let's face it, there's a lot of chaos down there in Brazil, and when it takes 45 minutes to travel 4 miles from the airport to the hotel, there's going to be a lot of frustration going on, not to mention maybe bathrooms that don't work at stadiums.
Yep, and it's been planned for years. Her tickets sold out forever ago.
I think just watching the event is going to be as interesting as watching some of the games.
I think you're very right, Joe. Always good to see you, my dear. Thanks for coming in. Bruce?